Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, as I've supported men in their love and work lives for 15 years now, many men ask for the right words to say to be more successful, attractive, and desirable. But I found it's not so simple as giving scripts or lines because every man is different. So giving words or scripts would be like giving a tall, thin man a shorter, wider man's pants, or vice versa. The words have to make sense for you and your personality, and there's so much happening beneath the surface that people are responding to. If you're interested in how to become a better lover and leader in your own unique way, go to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz, or you can text ALIVE to 44144. It only takes a couple minutes and you'll start to get an idea of how you can be both more respected and desired. After you fill it out, we can schedule a time to review your quiz and talk about your specific challenges and desires. So again, go to either shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text ALIVE to 44144. That's ALIVE to 44144. Enjoy this episode of Man Alive. Hello and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I'm your host, Shana James, and I'm here by myself today. I've been trying a couple more of these solo episodes when I have a topic I feel excited about, and I've been thinking a lot these days about dating and relationship in midlife. And there are some particular challenges that happen in midlife that I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to talk about actually some what I see as really profound opportunities, because there's often a discussion of how things fade or change, right? Our bodies are drooping and our sex drive is sometimes fading, or we're in a relationship where that spark, just isn't there as much. We haven't cultivated it as much. There are other things, that get in the way. Work is more important. We're more set in our ways. And sometimes we have other people to think about, kids and family, and sometimes parents are dying and we're taking care of kids at the same time. So there's a lot that happens in midlife, and that's challenging. And we also have some things on our side, right? Time has passed in a way that we tend to be more mature. Now, I will make a caveat here that if you haven't done your work, if you haven't done therapy or coaching or transformational workshops or, read self-help books, if you haven't really explored your own inner world, then this may not hold true for you. But what I'm going to say is that there's a possibility here. And, it takes a little bit of work to get to this place where I'm going to give you some ways that dating and relationship in midlife can actually be beautiful and rich and meaningful and passionate and profound. But if you're not doing your work, if you haven't done your work, you may not yet know how to get there, right? This may not be intuitive to you. So we can circle back around to that after and see what you might need. Part of what changes is that in our 20s and even our 30s, we can be more attached to our identities or needing to prove something. I'm strong, I'm powerful. Often for men, I've got it all together. I know what I'm doing here. And as we get older, that can shift a little bit. We can be humbled by life and humbled by death and illness and loss and grief and all of that. So when we start to bring that into relationship and dating, that humility can actually create much more room for intimacy, much more connection than we're used to when we're younger. And I think there's also, and again, this could be a possibility if this isn't true for you yet, but there's also a way of letting go of someone else is going to complete me, or this fantasy picture that I had of my life is actually real and viable, right? I remember sitting in the car with my son one day when we were listening to a fairy tale, and his little voice from the back seat after the fairy tale ended said, "But Mom, happily ever after isn't real, is it?" And I felt both crushed and elated at the same time, because I thought, oh no, this is like, do I tell him that, Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, like, do we talk about how they're not real? Or do I let him live in this fantasy? And I realized in that moment that my life and relationships has been much harder because I grew up in this Disney era and these, what are they, rom-com movies where people live happily ever after, and we're not actually shown the challenges. And so we actually had a really lovely conversation about, meaningful conversation about the fact that happily ever after isn't real, and that people can be happy and there can be a lot of good in life, but that there are also a lot of challenges. So when you start to have a deeper knowing of yourself and how you work and what happens when you're happy and what happens when you're not happy, and you start to have a willingness to be curious rather than make assumptions about others, relationship can be much more exciting and deep and healing even. If you've listened to this podcast before, you know that I got divorced. It's almost 7 years ago now. So I've been dating in midlife, and it's been a ride. It's been really interesting and really fascinating, challenging, exciting. There's been so many things that have happened. But one of the things that touches me most is the fact that as someone who likes to go deep and have really intimate relationships, I have dated men who I've initiated in a way into a different kind of relationship than they ever knew was possible, right? I've had men say to me, I never knew I could be loved or cared for so much, or I never knew I could show these vulnerable parts and still be loved. And, a man said to me, I've never had a woman hold me while I cried and then actually still be attracted to me. So there is this idea that it's one or the other, right? I can kind of be like a girlfriend to a woman, and we can be emotional together and we can cry and share these things, or I can be in a romantic relationship and then I've got to be the rock and be the man who has it together and the one who she's always attracted to. Remember, I recorded an episode, I don't think I ever put it out, but it was called The Two Bobs. And I'll see if I can find it. It was a man who I talked to who basically said, like, his wife was attracted to him when he was the solid, got it together, the man in control, the man in power. And when he came to her and had some more emotions or had some struggles, suddenly she lost her attraction. And that was really painful for him, of course, right? And so we were looking at, what do you do in that situation? What do you do when a woman only feels drawn to you when you are powerful? Now, that is work that I often do with women too, because I help women actually see that the more they can hold you in your vulnerability, the more you'll actually step into your power, is what I found, right? The more you'll feel your heart, and they'll get to feel connected in the ways that they want to in that way, but that you'll also step into much more of your power at the same time. So even though it's been really heartbreaking for me in a lot of ways to be dating in midlife and dating with a kid and the intense logistical challenges that come up, it's also been really beautiful and profound. And it's had me look at love and relationship in a totally different way. I remember after being divorced, I had this realization that I didn't even really know what love was. And it was a little bit of a, I don't know if I would say it was totally jaded, but it was definitely a thought where it wasn't my most optimistic and positive, right? But at the same time, it helped me really understand a couple different things. I mean, it helped me understand that love, lust, and partnership are three completely separate tracks, right? We can be in love with someone, we can have lust, but partnership isn't always just a given as a result of that. It also helped me really look at the fact that we tend to relate to love as a sensation, right? I remember one time I was dating after being divorced, and I was sitting on the couch with a girlfriend of mine, and she was asking me about how it was going. And I said, oh my God, I feel this warmth in my heart. My heart feels so light. And then I looked at her and I said, is this what people call love? Like, I literally had lost the connection between my emotions and sensations and these concepts. And in that moment, I also really got, oh my gosh, we talk about love as a feeling. But I had a really wise friend once who talked about love as more of an action. And one of the things I think that happens in our midlife is that we actually get to practice loving, and we get to love, I think, in ways that are more generous and more kind than we did in the past, when it's more likely when we're younger to try to want to get something from a person or from a relationship. And I had another really wise friend who said relationship is a horrible place to try to get something, and a really beautiful place to try to, or to co-create something. We should probably take the try out, right? So it's a horrible place to try to get something, and a beautiful place to really co-create something with another person. So I now see that people come into our lives for many, many reasons. And sometimes it's for love. Sometimes it's for sex. Sometimes it's to guide us to something. I remember a date I went on with a man where it was so clear we weren't meant to be together, but he reminded me of a spiritual practice I'd done years before. And it was like this light bulb went off, and I knew that it was time to start it again. I've also been with men where there's incredible healing, whether it's emotional or physical, or, we often choose relationships that are completing or attempting to kind of rewrite stories from our past, from something we didn't get from a parent or, an adult figure in our life. And so when we actually look at relationships as a potential to heal, rather than we're just in this for the high or the passion or the fun, then again, we start to have these really profound experiences. So I want to give you 5 ways to tap into both the power, I would say, and the beauty of dating and relationships in midlife. The first one I have for you is to take on the view that life is precious and stop taking people for granted, right? I have had people in my life die suddenly, have heart attacks, have, suddenly get cancer, right? There are things that are happening in midlife that don't usually happen in our earlier life. And when you start to see that the end may be nearer than we realize, or that it could actually come at any time. I mean, that could happen when we were younger. People get hit by cars. I mean, there are accidents and things like that. So it's always happening, but I think it becomes much more prominent as we get older and we start to see people pass on. And what this really makes possible is that you can start to be more intentional in your life. And I'm not saying to be Pollyanna and sweep things under the rug and not actually be honest about things when they're challenging, right? That's a pitfall that I think many men can fall into. But it's also to really start to, whether it's meditate on or just bring into your consciousness that this could be over. And what are the things you want to experience? And what are the ways you want to connect that you haven't yet? And what are the ways that you're hesitating and holding back, right? And is it really worth it? Is it really worth it to hold yourself back or hesitate when you may never then get to experience something in your life that you've really wanted to? Building on that one, the second one is then to really start to figure out and ask for what you want, right? It's easy to glide through life and think, well, this is just what relationships are. They're hard and people fall out of love and the passion phase, and to get really uninspired and sometimes resentful and sometimes numb. But usually they happen side by side. Usually there's like some numbness, but also this bitterness and resentfulness and blaming it on the other person. And when I start to work with men around what they actually want, right? Letting go of the ideas of, I'm too much. A woman told me, years ago that I was too sexual or too emotional or, too much of something. When I really coach men to start to get clear what they actually want, it creates this incredible shift in their lives. They start to feel more inspired. They start to feel more excited. And then I help them start to ask for it and to build up that courage and the confidence and learn to have these challenging conversations where, things have been shoved under the rug for so long that they can be really surprising to someone. If you're on a date, then it's great actually because there's no history there. But if you're in a relationship, it can be kind of shocking and surprising. But as you learn to have these challenging conversations, or to sit with a woman when she feels confused or upset or frustrated or really sad, that you are actually being honest at this point about wanting more passion and feeling your relationship fading or things like that. When you can actually start to sit with those emotions without just saying, oh, okay, forget it. Then I guess we'll just leave that and I won't even try to have it. When you can not do that, and when you can not get really upset and frustrated and start to react, then you can start having the really deep conversations where you're both starting to be there for each other, to help each other be more fulfilled, to help each other feel more joy and more preciousness in life. The third one is you can start to get clear that you're upset, right? When you feel pissed, when you feel disappointed, all those things, that is a doorway to healing for you. And I'm not going to say that the other person has no part, right? There is a dance, and I actually believe every dynamic you play a part, whether you're choosing or not choosing. Not choosing is a choice. I used to really look at my parents' relationship and see, okay, the person who's more dominant and, more angry, I would side with the person who was more vulnerable and took less action. And then I started to see, when you don't stand up for yourself, that is actually an action, right? That creates a dynamic. So there are two sides and two dancers in every dance. But when you start to turn your attention back to yourself rather than blaming another, and really get clear that what you're upset about is often something that's older, that's not just happening in this relationship dynamic, but it's been happening often your whole life, then you can start to heal and you can start to have more connection and intimacy where before there were fights or there was distance and deflecting each other. And you can even learn your own style of what happens when you don't get what you want, what happens when you engage in conflict. You can even, one of the things I've done in relationships is created a user manual where we each started to track our less than stellar actions and behaviors. And so that we would both actually know, here's what happens when I don't get what I want. And actually, here's what would be really helpful from you, right? Not to put all my responsibility on someone else, but if I'm not getting what I want, I'm getting kind of grumpy, what would be really helpful would be maybe for you to just remind me that I'm loved and that you actually do care. And then I could actually soften and relax and feel like you're still here on the same team with me, as opposed to we are on opposite teams. All right, the fourth way you can tap into the power and beauty of dating in midlife is to consider why you're actually in a relationship or dating. Right? When we're younger, it's often just a thing to do. We want to start a family, we want to have sex, we want to have someone to play with. But as we get older, we're not always in relationship for the same reasons, right? We may not want to have a family. We may, we may still want to have a sexual partner or someone to do things with, but there's such a deeper level we can go to when we start to ask ourselves, like, why am I in relationship? What is the purpose of this? And another question many men have really appreciated that I've given them is to ask, what's the highest good for each of us in this situation? So if you're dating, it might be, rather than asking, is this person my partner? Yes or no? Having it be really binary. It's like, what is the highest good for each of us here? Maybe this is going to be someone who opens my heart in a way that I haven't in a long time. And yet this isn't the person I'm going to partner with, but I'll be more ready for the next relationship. Or maybe this is someone who's going to help me open to my creativity. Maybe this is someone who's going to become a dear, dear friend and open me to some experiences I've never had before, right? If you're in relationship already, what's the highest good for each of us in this situation? Maybe more you're in a particular dynamic, or there's something you each want from each other, and really getting clear why you want it as opposed to just that you want it can help both of you feel connected and both of you feel really inspired to create it together. And the fifth way I'll say to tap into the beauty and power of dating in midlife is to start to learn to love for real. I shared about how after getting divorced, I realized I really didn't know what love was. And my really wise friend was saying that love is more of an action than a feeling. When you love someone, you take care of someone. When you love someone, you care about them in a way that you want what's best for them. Love in our main cultural context often tends to be about, it's not necessarily that it's all about controlling someone, but there is an element of control. Well, if I control this person in a way, or there's often a subconscious aspect to this, but if I'm powerful in a certain way, I'm afraid this person might leave me. Or if I am sexual too soon, this person won't love me. Or we can play these games where we manipulate and attempt to control people. Even monogamy can be a way of, well, I need this person to love me and love me only, right? So I've been having a conversation with a client recently where he's dating and he's looking at, well, why do I need to be the only one in this woman's life? Is it really about my pride and my ego more than it's actually about a real need that I have? So when you start to, what I call, learn to love for real, right, there's more of a generosity. There's more of a question of, how can I love this person well in the way that she or he wants to be loved? Not in the way that I want to love that person, because my way of feeling loved may be really different than that person's way of feeling loved. If you've read the book by Gary Chapman, The 5 Love Languages, it's a really powerful book on understanding that we can be in a relationship dynamic where I don't feel loved even though you feel like you're loving me, because our love languages are different. And so it's not translating to me as love. So when I think about learning to love for real, it does kind of take on this, there's a more of a maturity, there's more of a generosity, there's more of a checking our assumptions and actually being willing to get to know someone versus thinking we already know someone and putting them in a box and thinking, well, you were that way last year, or you were that way yesterday, so this is who you are today, so I'm going to relate to you like that. When you learn to love for real, you bring curiosity back into the mix and you allow people to grow and become who they are, rather than trying to get them, like I said, in this way of controlling to stay who they've been because that's better for you. All right, those were the 5 ways to start to experience more of the power and beauty of dating and relationship in midlife, rather than the pain, the struggle, the loss, the frustration, the confusion. So I know that all of that is there. And I also want to orient you toward what's possible. So let me know how this went for you, what you got out of it. Feel free to email me, comment on the Facebook page. And I hope this is helpful. And I really hope for you that you bring more of yourself than maybe you did when you were younger, right? That you bring more of your desires, more of your truth, more of your struggles, more of what's not working for you, and that you use this midlife opportunity to get honest and real, because it really does. In a session yesterday, I was talking to a man about how he was with a woman and the spark wasn't really there, and he was starting to wonder if it was ever going to be there. And then they had a really honest conversation. They got more vulnerable and more honest, and suddenly the spark was back. So if you have experienced or are experiencing relationships where the spark is fading, the connection is fading, honesty is often a really powerful tool to bring that back. All right, let me know if you have questions, and I hope you enjoyed this episode.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144 or head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.